Hello and welcome to Eat Clean Lesson 10. I've got my wonderful assistant Jake here with me. And what we're going over today is the plan was to do a review of this sheet here, the Eat Clean Do's, Don'ts, and Sometimes. And as I was thinking about how I was going to review this, the first main thing that we wanted to talk about on this is how you're using this sheet is you're trying to achieve the big goals at the top here. So there's, I can't remember how many there are, but the big goals right across the top: decrease processed food, increase veggies, increase water, and so on it goes across. As I was starting to write notes on how to decrease processed foods, I realized that alone needed its own lesson. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to, in decreasing processed foods, it's sometimes confusing if I say just to minimize any foods that come in a package, because the reality is we're not farming actively. We're not the ones that are butchering our meat. So it becomes a little bit more complex as to what processed versus non-processed. So what I've done here is I've laid out a continuum of foods going from the healthiest and the things that truly are non-processed down to the things that you want to minimize in your diet. And hopefully as I go over this, it will help you decide what is less processed, and those are the things that you want to focus in on your diet mostly. And hopefully I can help you choose, of the things that you are choosing that are processed, make the smartest choices possible. So I think it's pretty obvious that ideally what you want to be doing is majority of your diet should come from this area here. So what we're looking at here, obviously fruits, vegetables. I've got some yam. For those who choose to eat meat, we've got non-processed or minimally processed meat, eggs, ideally free from. So with the meat and egg products, you're ideally going for antibiotic-free if possible. The other thing that is important to suggest here or explain is that things like frozen fruit, that even though it's been processed, it's been through a processing, some sort of a process. Really, the only thing that's in here is our frozen berries. So that's still an excellent choice. As with, say, something like this, it's in a package, but if I look at the ingredients, all it is organic edamame. So there's no additives, preservatives, or whatnot. So still an excellent choice. Likewise, say something like this comes in a package, but this is literally pink salmon. If I was to look a little bit closer on the ingredients here, it does have 2 preservatives. And this is oatmeal. Thank you, Jacob. There are 2 items here of preservatives. So if I was to further improve this, I would just get plain salmon, either fresh or frozen, that didn't have any sort of additives. Over here, now we continue along. Now this continuum isn't perfect, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what's going on. Jake's wanting some more turkey here. There you go, buddy. We've got a lot of grains here that I've pulled out. So I've got quinoa, I've got a brown rice and wild rice blend, I've got some split lentils. These are all things that, yes, they have been processed to some extent, but you can see they're individual grains. They're far less processed than maybe a white rice or a full bread or cookies or crackers. So again, this is a good choice here. If I'm thinking about other things that we eat that are somewhat processed but that are still relatively good for us, things like nuts. Nuts do go through, most of them, some sort of minimal processing, but again, they're still relatively whole food in their relative natural state. So that's also a really good choice. Same thing with dried fruits. Now, you do have to watch the glycemic load on this, but this is something that, again, in the grand scheme of things, that's an okay choice. If you're adding that to add a little bit of natural sweetener would be okay. I've got spices here as well. Spices, this is an excellent choice. Now, they have been processed to some extent, but this is a really good way to add some flavoring. If I was over here and I had some, say, fresh cilantro, you can understand how that might be slightly better than the eggs. That might be slightly better than the packaged spices. Continuing on, things like peanut butter and cashew butter. These what items here, they have been processed, but ingredients just nuts. Versus if I had a peanut butter that had the added sugars and salt and hydrogenation, etc., that's going to be a poor choice. So you can kind of see, obviously with the way that we eat, you're not going to see a ton of poor choices. But let's slide over here and just take a look at where the continuum lies of poor choices or less healthy choices. So less healthy choices would be things like one of Jake's favorite things, goldfish. So if I can get him to snack on, say, fresh apple and maybe a little bit of cheese, that might be a better option than that. So other things that would be obviously a poor choice. So here's an example of nuts. Nuts versus the nut that I showed you before. This has got a ton of added sugar and other sorts of trace elements and added oil. So that is a much less healthy choice versus just my plain unsalted nuts. Should be a no-brainer, but things like this, again, some Halloween candy left over that we never gave out, or if you're eating a lot of breads and cookies and whatnot, so this is a biscotti, you know, again, even if it's relatively, that is grandma's cereal, that's right. So if we're, is what Jake's showing, if we're trying to compare things that come in a box, why would the Weetabix be a better choice than, say, some of our other cereals over here? The Weetabix, if I look at it, it's only got 4 ingredients. It's got greater than 4 grams of fiber and less than 10 grams of sugar. So this is, in terms of the continuum, in a packaged cereal, that's going to lie closer to this end versus, you know, even the cereals that we have overall are quite good. But this Shreddies has got 6 grams of sugar versus this has only got 2 grams of sugar. So again, continuum-wise. If you choose to have dairy, again, it is somewhat processed, but if you can't, choose your skim or low-fat versions, and that's going to be a better choice. Things that I've got in the middle here, so I've got a salad dressing here, kind of in the middle spectrum of choice versus salad dressing down here. The difference being, if I look at the ingredients here, I can pronounce pretty much everything on here, and there really are no preservatives in something like this, versus if I look at the ingredients on this Kraft one, there's a bunch of things that I can't even pronounce, so that's going to be a less optimal choice. You do have to make, you know, you can't always necessarily eat everything from here unless you're a perfect eater, but you want to choose the things that you really enjoy and consider them a little bit of a treat. You found it, good for you. And just obviously really try and have most of your food coming down from the left end of the spectrum over here. Definitely, in general, the less things that you can get out of a package, the better. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea. I brought out a ton of different types of foods here, and hopefully just scrolling across you can see, you know, the continuum of going from, excuse you, ideal to non-ideal. Bless you, honey. And what you want to do with this sheet here is, if say your goal is to make smarter choices and overall eat less processed foods, you want to really take a look at what your overall diet is. Maybe you could make a log of what you're eating and identify which items of what you're eating on a routine basis come from this end of the spectrum. And do you love them? Do you really need them? Is there a choice that you could swap out that comes from this end of the spectrum? If you really love it and there's just no option, then no problem. Keep it in your diet, but just make sure that's a very rare exception. But 80% of your diet is coming from up here. And just make sure the things that you choose from this end, there's no better alternative, and it is truly a treat that you really, really enjoy, and it is worth that splurge. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions and you'd like to fire me off an email and ask me, where does this food sit along the continuum, feel free to do so. One quick note that I threw out here, this item here, so this is oatmeal that we make from scratch. Notice how that falls above the processed cereals. So again, the more things you can make from scratch, the better. If I was to make a personal goal for myself, one thing that I don't like is that out of convenience for Jake, when I'm traveling, I tend to choose a lot of things like this to grab for Jake. Now, in comparison to what I could choose, there are a lot of worse choices I could do for Jake, but if I really wanted to make the smartest choices for Jake, what I would be doing is similar to this oatmeal, is I should be making my own bars out of fruits and applesauce and oats, and creating these bars myself and baking them myself. And that's what a personal goal of mine would be, to make things better for Jake. And that's it. So I hope you've learned a little bit. Please take a look at the notes, and if you have any questions, fire me off an email. Thanks so much.